And finally, the most prestigious honor of the evening, the Visionary of the Year award, goes to Evelyn Reed. The MC's voice echoed through the magnificent ballroom in San Francisco, but to me, it was just a distant hum. 19 years I'd poured into Innovate Dynamics, building it from a fledgling startup into an industry giant. This award was my rightful due. I stepped onto the stage, a strained smile on my face, acutely aware of the hundreds of eyes fixed on me. As I approached the podium, my gaze landed on the icy stare of Alexander Vance, the new CEO who had taken charge just 2 months prior. He sat in the front row, his arms crossed, a thin, almost imperceptible smirk on his lips. There was no congratulatory nod, no sign of recognition, nothing but contempt. After the photos, I strode directly toward him. I couldn't tolerate his blatant disrespect. "Congratulations, Evelyn," he said, his voice laced with falseness. "You've done a wonderful job." I looked him straight in the eyes, unable to hide my fury. "A wonderful job. That's 2 decades of my life, Alexander. Over $2 million in annual revenue for the company and a team that worked tirelessly." "A wonderful job is an insult." He chuckled derisively, standing up and lowering his voice. "Accolades are for women who are good at laying foundations. But a new house doesn't need old foundations, Evelyn." His words hit me like a slap to the face, but they did nothing to extinguish the fire within me. "So, you're trying to dig up your own foundation, are you?" I shot back, my voice as sharp as a razor. "Be careful, because once you start digging, you might find there's nothing left to stand on." He offered a cold, humorless smile before turning his back and walking away. I stood motionless, my chest heaving with rage. Suddenly, I heard a quiet, brittle snap from my handbag. I opened it, and a new wave of anger washed over me. My gold-plated Parker fountain pen, a gift from the company's founder, was broken in 2. The barrel was cracked, the nib grotesquely twisted, a brutal, undeniable message from Alexander Vance. He wanted me to know he would destroy me, but he was wrong. He didn't know that for women like me, being pushed to the edge is when we become most dangerous. I closed my eyes, clenching the broken pen. My fury hardened into a silent oath. He would pay for this arrogance with his entire career. The silence after the awards night was a thick, suffocating blanket. I walked the floors of Innovate Dynamics, feeling like I was in a minefield. The friendly smiles and cheerful hellos from my colleagues had vanished, replaced by averted gazes and wary glances. I knew exactly what was happening. Alexander Vance called it strategic recalibration, but I called it a purge. He wanted to dismantle my army. I walked over to the desk of Mark, my head of software development, and one of the most trusted members of my team. His chair was empty, his computer screen dark. My stomach clenched with a terrible feeling of dread. "Where's Mark?" I asked a new employee, a young woman with bleached blonde hair and a designer jacket. She looked at me with a deer-in-the-headlights expression, her eyes darting away. I don't know. He wasn't in today." Just then, Isabella, my creative design lead, approached me. She gripped my arm tightly and whispered, "Evelyn, he was fired." They gave him 15 minutes to clear out his things. A surge of white-hot anger rushed through me. 15 minutes? He gave 12 years of his life to this company? Isabella pulled me into a secluded corner. They moved Anya to accounting too, a senior strategist like her now counting invoices. He's taking us all down, one by one. What does he think he's doing? I hissed, unable to contain my fury. Does he think he can build an empire on the ruins he's creating? Just then, Alexander Vance appeared, a smug, victorious smile on his face. Looking for your old friends, Evelyn? I straightened my back and looked him dead in the eyes. They're not my old friends. They're the best people in this business. And you, in your sheer ignorance, just pushed them out. He scoffed, stepping closer to me. No, Evelyn, you're wrong. I'm not ignorant. I'm cleaning house. This company doesn't need old legends. We need young, fast, and flexible talent. People who follow orders without asking questions. And how long do you think a collective without experience or loyalty can survive? I shot back, my voice dripping with defiance. You're digging this company's grave, Alexander. You've gotten rid of the legends, but what you don't realize is, those legends were the heart, the brain, the very best of Innovate Dynamics. His eyes narrowed. That's your problem, Evelyn. You think you're everything. You're too arrogant, and that arrogance will cost you. With that, he turned and walked away. I stood there, my chest heaving. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't from fear. It was from pure, unadulterated rage. I knew then that the final blow was coming, and I had to be ready. The final blow didn't come from a formal meeting or a termination letter. It came in the most cowardly, humiliating way possible. It was a cold Tuesday morning as I was sipping my coffee, reviewing my schedule. An email popped up in my inbox with the subject line, Ether Campaign Kickoff Meeting. But my name was conspicuously absent from the participant list. A shiver of dread ran down my spine. Despite the exclusion, I opened the email and clicked the video conference link, with both my camera and microphone turned off. My premonition was confirmed. There she was, Chloe, a young, arrogant strategist handpicked by Alexander Vance. He had called her the future of the company. She stood confidently in front of a large screen, presenting a campaign I had spent an entire year meticulously crafting. The Ether campaign for a major tech partner. My hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms. Every word, every slide, every number. It was all my work, my intellectual property. Yet on the screen, my name had been meticulously erased and replaced with Chloe's. This is a bold and groundbreaking campaign, Chloe said, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction. The goal is to take Innovate Dynamics to a new level. We'll be targeting a specific market. She continued to speak, but her words were just a blur of noise. She was reciting my plan, my blueprint. A hot rage boiled inside me. I wanted to stand up, to scream that it was my hard work, to tear off the mask of deceit from her and from Alexander Vance, but I held back. This humiliation had to be exchanged for something far greater. Just then, my phone buzzed with a message from Isabella. Evelyn, are you watching this? She's presenting your Ether project. Why are you so silent? I typed back, my fingers trembling with fury. I'm watching. I'm witnessing a pathetic farce. Isabella's reply came immediately. This is unacceptable. He's trying to erase everything you are. I stared at the screen where Chloe was basking in her undeserved glory. I took a deep breath. They think they've won. They think I'll crumble. But no, Isabella. This humiliation won't break me. It will forge me. I closed my laptop and walked out to the balcony. My anger was no longer a fire consuming me. It was a cold, sharp power. I knew I couldn't fight them on their own turf anymore. They had the authority, the position, but they lacked my intelligence and my resilience. The Ether campaign was my brainchild. I had poured hundreds of hours into market research, dozens of sleepless nights, fine-tuning every number and every word. And now, some unknown junior employee was shamelessly claiming it, with the full backing of Alexander Vance. My fury went beyond the betrayal itself. It was the utter disrespect for my talent and my work. He didn't just want to fire me, he wanted to erase me. I pulled out my phone and called a lawyer I knew, a stern woman named Eleanor. My voice was low and steady as I explained the situation. "Eleanor, they've stolen my work," I said. "My entire campaign. What are my options?" "Do you have a paper trail, emails, documents with your name on them?" she asked. "Everything," I replied. "I'm meticulous. I have a digital archive of every draft, every presentation, every email related to that project." "Good," she said. "We can build a case. We can sue for intellectual property theft, breach of contract." "No," I cut her off. "That's not what I want. They want to play a different game, and I'm going to play it better." Eleanor was silent for a moment. "What are you proposing?" "I want to know the legal ramifications of what I'm about to do," I said. "I'm going to use this betrayal as a launching point. I want to start my own firm, with my own clients, with my own team." "That's a bold move, Evelyn," she said. "Are you prepared for a scorched earth battle?" "I'm not just prepared," I said, looking out at the San Francisco skyline, a determined glint in my eyes. "I'm already at war, and this time, I'm not just fighting for a project. I'm fighting for my entire legacy." That phone call was the first step in my rebellion. I wasn't going to beg for a place at their table. I was going to build a new one, and I would make sure they couldn't afford a seat. I would use their betrayal as the fuel to build my own empire, and I would prove to Alexander Vance that you can't build a future on a foundation of lies and theft. "Okay, I understand completely. From this point forward, every chapter will be written in American English, maintaining the dramatic, high-stakes tone with a strong, emotional protagonist and plenty of dialogue." My fury had burned away into something else, something far colder, far sharper. That humiliating video call had been a public execution of my reputation, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me collapse. I didn't drive home. Home would have been too easy, too safe, a place for the wounded to retreat. I needed somewhere I could let the storm inside me settle into steel. So I drove aimlessly through San Francisco, past towers of glass and steel, until I found a quiet bar tucked into a side street. No neon sign screamed its name, no crowd spilled onto the sidewalk. Perfect. I stepped inside, ordered a glass of whiskey neat, and sat by the window where the hazy glow of the city lights blurred against the glass. They thought they had defeated me. They thought that by stealing my work, humiliating me in front of my peers, and plotting to throw me out after 19 years, they had ended me. But they were wrong. All they had done was sharpen me. They had stripped away the illusions, burned away the loyalty, and left me with only a new, far more dangerous purpose. The whiskey burned down my throat, steadying me. Then my phone vibrated on the table. Isabella, the one person I trusted to hear my voice in this moment. "Evelyn, are you okay?" she blurted the moment I picked up. "I heard everything. They're treating you like garbage." I stared at the city lights, voice calm and steady. "I'm fine, and no, Isabella, they don't see me as garbage." "Then what do they see?" she asked quietly. "They see me as a threat," I said, my tone cutting like ice. "And they're right." Her silence stretched. Finally, she whispered, "What are you going to do? Are you going to sue them?" I let out a humorless laugh. Number lawsuits take time, money, and they keep you trapped on their battlefield. I'm not going to fight them on their turf. I'm going to build my own, and it's going to be 1,000,000 times bigger and better. That night, I didn't sleep. The anger no longer clouded my judgment. It had transformed into fuel. I pulled out a notebook and began sketching out a business plan with meticulous precision. I listed every client who had stayed at Innovate Dynamics because of me, not the company name. People who trusted my word more than a logo. Then I listed colleagues, talented minds Vance had pushed aside, demoted, silenced. Every name was another brick in the foundation of something new. By the time dawn light broke through the blinds, I had the skeleton of an empire. The first call I made was to Mark. "Evelyn," he sighed, voice heavy with defeat. "They kicked me out yesterday, walked me past security like I was a criminal. I just wanted to check on you." I didn't let his despair linger. "Mark, I have a proposition. Do you trust me?" He hesitated only a moment. "Always, Evelyn." "Good, because I have a plan, a new campaign, a new company, and I want you with me. This time, we're not working for them. We're working for ourselves." The shift in his tone was instant, from weary to alive. "A new company? You're serious? I thought after what they did, you'd leave the industry for good." "Leave?" I laughed coldly. "Why would I leave when I'm the best one in it?" "They tried to erase me, Mark. But you don't erase a legacy. You amplify it. I want to build something too big, too powerful, for them to ever contain." The second call was to Anya, a brilliant data analytics expert now wasting away in accounting. She answered with a sigh. "Evelyn, what's going on?" "Tell me," I said. "What are you doing over there?" "Counting beans," she replied bitterly. "That's what they reduced me to. Counting beans." My voice sharpened. "I have a different assignment for you. I need a strategic analyst, not to balance numbers, but to help me chart the future. Are you ready for that?" Her voice cracked. "Are you serious? They told me I wasn't valuable anymore, that my skills didn't matter." "They were wrong," I said, conviction pouring through every word. "Your value isn't defined by the seat they forced you into. It's defined by your talent, and I need that talent." Silence. Then a sharp inhale. "Evelyn, yes. God, yes. I'm with you." The rest of the day became a rhythm, dialing numbers, hearing weary voices shift into hopeful ones. One by one, I reassembled the people who had been overlooked, cast aside, or betrayed. Each call was a reaffirmation of loyalty. Each promise was a piece of the empire taking shape. By nightfall, I set my notebook down. It was no longer just paper filled with scribbles. It was a declaration of war. Alexander Vance thought he had destroyed me. He thought he had left me broken and alone. But in his arrogance, he had armed me. He had scattered the best pieces into my hands. And now, I would build something new, something stronger, something that belonged to me and me alone. This time, there would be no boardroom vultures, no politics dragging brilliance into the mud. This time, I would forge an empire so vast they wouldn't just notice it, they would bow before it. And when Innovate Dynamics saw the Titan rising from their ashes, they would know whose hand had built it. And they would regret ever thinking they could erase Evelyn Cole. My rebellion had already begun. For the past few days, I'd been working from a temporary office in a co-working space in Oakland. The place smelled faintly of coffee and ambition, filled with strangers building their dreams. It suited me. The San Francisco skyline loomed across the bay like a glittering specter, once a symbol of everything I had sacrificed for Innovate Dynamics. Now it mocked me, a monument to an empire I was preparing to dismantle brick by brick. I filled my days with precision, calls with lawyers to establish the framework of my new firm, meetings with potential clients who still believed in me, not the company I was leaving behind, drafts of proposals for a biotech partner that could anchor the foundation of my new empire. Every hour carried a pulse of electricity. For the first time in years, the silence of my work was alive, not suffocating, but sharp, focused, dangerous. Then, in the middle of my momentum, an email appeared. My chest tightened as soon as I saw the sender. From Alexander Vance. Subject: Urgent meeting with Alexander Vance. The words were simple, almost casual, but I knew exactly what this was. The final act. The last curtain in his corporate coup. He had humiliated me, stolen my projects, undermined me in boardrooms. Now he would deliver the finishing blow himself. I arrived at his office just before noon. His secretary gave me a nervous glance, but I brushed past without waiting. Alexander sat behind his enormous mahogany desk, a fortress of wealth and ego. He looked up with that signature smirk, cold, practiced, the expression of a man who thought he had already won. "Evelyn," he said smoothly, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Thank you for coming. Have a seat." I remained standing, arms crossed, my voice hard as stone. "I'll stand. I prefer to look you in the eye when we talk." He chuckled, low and humorless. "Defiant as always. You've become quite the topic of conversation lately. Whispers, chatter about your so-called successes. It's a distraction. This company cannot afford to be trapped in the past. We need to move forward without the weight of history." I leaned forward against his desk, meeting his icy stare. "So let me understand this. You're firing me because I was too good at my job? Because my success shines too brightly for your shadow to hide in?" His smirk didn't falter. "I'm terminating you because you became the headline. You've built a cult of personality around yourself and your legends. You're too big for this organization. We need to control the narrative, and your presence makes that impossible." For a moment, the air in the room turned frigid. My blood ran cold, but the fire of my anger only roared louder. My voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You're a coward, Alexander. This isn't about the narrative. This isn't about distraction. You're not firing me because I'm too big. You're firing me because you couldn't steal what I built and call it your own. You tried to erase my name from the work I created, and you failed, and now you're afraid. Afraid of me. Afraid of what I represent." His smirk slipped for the briefest second before he slammed a letter onto the desk. The sharp crack of paper against wood echoed like a gunshot. "Enough. Here's your termination. 1 hour to clear your office. Security will escort you if necessary." I picked up the letter. Thin paper, flimsy ink. This was his victory trophy, the document he believed would erase me. My hands didn't tremble. Instead, I let a thin smile curl across my lips. "You think this is over?" My voice was steady, colder than I'd ever heard it. "You think a piece of paper wins you the war?" I tore the letter cleanly in half, then again, shredding it into useless fragments. The pieces drifted onto his desk like confetti at a funeral. "This isn't the end, Alexander. This is the beginning. And when I'm finished, you'll wish you had never started this fight." For once, he didn't answer. He simply sat there, staring at the shredded remains, his silence betraying more than his words ever could. I turned on my heel and walked out. I left my office keys on the receptionist's desk, my box of personal effects untouched. Let them keep the trinkets. My legacy wasn't trapped in a cardboard box. It lived in my mind, in my team, in the countless hours of brilliance and loyalty they could never replicate. As I stepped out of the Innovate Dynamics building for the last time, the sunlight felt different, sharper, brighter. Freedom rushed through my veins like a drug. No more boardroom politics. No more stolen credit. No more chains. This wasn't defeat. This was liberation. My rebellion was no longer silent. It was war, and I already had an army waiting. On the sidewalk, I pulled out my phone and typed a single message to Mark, Isabella, and Anya. They just fired me. Meet me at the same spot. We have work to do. I hit send and slipped the phone back into my pocket. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying their empire on my shoulders. I was building my own. I walked into the familiar coffee shop in Oakland, a place that had once been nothing more than neutral ground for off-site brainstorms. But today, it felt different. Today, it felt like a war council. The air smelled of roasted beans and rain from the streets outside, but beneath it all was a charge of anticipation. I wasn't walking in as a senior strategist for Innovate Dynamics anymore. That title was gone, stripped away in a moment of betrayal. No, I walked in as something sharper, something freer. A warrior who had just escaped the battlefield and was now gathering her army. Mark, Isabella, and Anya were already there, clustered in the back corner booth. They looked tired, haunted even, but when their eyes found me, I saw something else flicker behind the anxiety. Hope, desperation, the kind of raw faith that only grows in people who have been broken and are ready to fight back. I set my bag on the table, pulled out my laptop, and let the words fall with deliberate weight. They just fired me. No pleasantries, no wasted seconds. They think they won, but they have no idea they just handed us the greatest opportunity of our lives. The three of them exchanged glances, but it was Isabella who spoke first. Her voice trembled, anger and disbelief tangled together. Evelyn, this is insane. Fired you? After everything you built? Are they completely out of their minds? They're not insane, I replied evenly, meeting her eyes. My tone was calm, almost clinical, though inside me burned a fire hotter than I'd ever felt. They're afraid that I can beat them on their own turf. And here's the truth, Isabella. They're right. I flipped open my laptop and turned the glowing screen toward them. We're not victims, we're founders. As of today, we have a new company, ER Strategic Advisors. ER for Evelyn Reed. For a moment, silence hung over the table, thick enough to drown in. Mark, who rarely spoke up first in meetings, leaned forward. His voice cracked with both awe and doubt. A new company? Us? Evelyn, are you serious? We have nothing. No office, no investors, no clients. Just 4 people sitting in a coffee shop. I cut him off before the doubt could spread. Wrong. We have everything we need. Intelligence, experience, loyalty. And most importantly, we share the same purpose. Offices can be rented. Funding can be secured. But what we have can't be manufactured. And as for clients, I let the sentence trail off, a faint smile tugging at my lips. Check your email. Their phones lit up almost in unison. I had sent the message just before walking in, with a subject line that read simply, check your inboxes. The 3 of them tapped their screens. At first, confusion, then disbelief, then, slowly, awe. It was Anya who found her voice first. She looked up from her phone, her eyes wide, shining with something close to relief. Lexora Biomed, she whispered. One of our biggest former clients. They said they don't want the new Innovate Dynamics. They want the old guard. Her voice grew stronger, the exhaustion peeling away. Evelyn, they want to work with us. Exactly. I leaned back, letting their reactions sink in. Lexora already called me. They said the new management feels hollow, unstable. They don't trust Vance or his board. But they trust me. They trust us. We are the old guard they want, the people who actually delivered results. The words hung there, pulsing like a drumbeat. Mark's expression shifted from doubt to something fiercer, almost boyish excitement. Isabella's hands clenched into fists, her fear dissolving into determination. Anya's exhaustion had evaporated, replaced by the fire of someone who had been told she was worthless and just learned the opposite was true. I closed the laptop slowly, letting the moment breathe. This is our chance. They thought they could bury us, but all they did was plant the seeds of something stronger. We are not Innovate Dynamics leftovers. We are ER Strategic Advisors, and we are going to prove that the future belongs to us. The first few days were a blur of frenetic energy. Our phones were ringing off the hook, but not with new client leads. They were ringing with the sound of pure, unadulterated panic from Innovate Dynamics. They were finally realizing the gravity of their mistake, and it was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The first call was from my former assistant, her voice a terrified whisper. "Evelyn, there's chaos here. 3 of your biggest clients just terminated their contracts. They sent emails saying they're following their strategic advisor, and they're not renewing. Alexander is losing it." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, a cold smile on my face. "It seems they value loyalty and talent more than he anticipated." She continued, her voice trembling. "It's not just them. The marketing department is in disarray. The Ether campaign. It's a disaster without you. The client is furious and threatening a lawsuit. They're demanding to speak to the person who originally pitched the idea." "Well, you know where to find me," I said, and hung up. The calls kept coming. My former colleagues, the ones who had stayed behind out of fear, were calling to tell me about the unraveling. I heard about the botched presentations, the missed deadlines, and the complete lack of vision from Alexander's new team. The Vision Tech campaign, which Chloe had presented as her own, was a complete failure without my leadership. The client was furious and canceled the contract. Alexander's new strategic recalibration had backfired spectacularly. One afternoon, my phone rang with a number I knew well. It was the head of a major tech company that had been a client for over a decade. "Evelyn," he said, his voice tense. "What is going on over there? We've tried to get in touch with you, but your number was scrubbed from their system. We just got an email that you're no longer with the firm. This is unacceptable." "I'm no longer with them because they terminated me," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "They fired me and my entire team." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Fired you? Why would they do that? You're the reason we've stayed with them all these years." "That's a question you should ask Alexander Vance," I replied. "He felt the company needed a new direction, a different vision." "Well, his vision is going to bankrupt them," he said, his anger palpable. "We're terminating our contract with Innovate Dynamics, and we're going with you. We want to work with ER Strategic Advisors." I smiled, a genuine victorious smile. "I'm not surprised. I'm already prepared for that. We can start next week." My revenge wasn't a loud declaration. It was a quiet, steady unraveling. I had given Alexander Vance a chance to prove his worth, and he had failed. He had underestimated me, and in his arrogance, he had handed me the very tools I needed to build my own empire. The firm that had so casually discarded me was now spiraling into a crisis they couldn't control, and I was the one pulling the strings. Our conversation lasted for hours. We talked about business plans, client outreach strategies, and the daunting challenges ahead. But no one complained. No one showed any sign of discouragement. Their eyes burned with a shared fire of revenge and a desire to prove themselves. "What's the first thing we do, Evelyn?" Isabella asked. "First," I replied, "we build a plan. We're going to prove to them that they made the biggest mistake of their lives. And then," I looked out the window toward the San Francisco skyline, "we're going to beat them." That same day, we leased a small office in Oakland, just a short ferry ride from Innovate Dynamics. It wasn't glamorous, no glass or steel, no fancy receptionist. but it was ours. We got to work immediately, toiling through the night. We knew we were in a race against time, but no one felt tired. We had been cornered, but that had only made us stronger. Later that day, I sent a short email to Alexander Vance. The subject line was a simple, "Congratulations." The body contained a single powerful sentence. "You have just awakened something you cannot control." I pressed send, a cold smile on my face. The real war had just begun. My revenge wasn't a fiery explosion. It was a slow, deliberate burn, and I could feel the heat rising with every passing week. Our modest office in downtown Oakland, once nothing more than a cramped rental with flickering lights and second-hand desks, had transformed into a hive of relentless energy. The air was charged with late-night brainstorming sessions, whiteboards crowded with strategy maps, and the kind of quiet, unstoppable determination that only comes from being underestimated. We had already secured 3 major accounts. Ironically, the very clients Innovate Dynamics had once treated as untouchable. To outsiders, it looked impossible. How could 4 people operating out of a shoebox office compete with a corporation boasting hundreds of employees and a glossy headquarters? But those clients hadn't followed the logo. They had followed the loyalty. They trusted us because they knew we fought for their success when the corporate machine only cared about quarterly optics. That trust was worth more than any funding round or flashy press release. One gray Tuesday morning, as I shuffled through a stack of proposals, my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated. The area code was San Francisco. I almost sent it to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to answer. "Evelyn Reed?" a polished voice asked. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "This is Mark Thompson. I'm an editor at the Business Strategist magazine. We've been following your story." I froze. "My story?" I repeated, trying to mask the sudden jolt of adrenaline. "Yes. The whispers about what happened inside Innovate Dynamics, the abrupt firings, the quiet exodus of talent, and of course, the disappearance of several of their flagship accounts. People are saying you're the woman behind it all." For a moment, I said nothing. Then a cold, measured smile curved across my face. This was the opening I had been waiting for, the moment when all the months of betrayal and humiliation began to tilt back in my favor. "Mr. Thompson," I finally said, keeping my tone calm, almost disinterested. "I don't know what you're referring to. I simply started a new firm with a few of the most talented people I've ever worked with." "We believe there's more," he pressed, his voice lowering like he was offering me a secret. "A story of betrayal, corporate sabotage, and a woman who turned her dismissal into a comeback. We'd like to feature you on our cover." The word cover echoed in my mind, sweet and intoxicating. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the peeling paint on our office ceiling, letting the weight of it sink in. This wasn't just visibility. This was vindication. Alexander had tried to erase me, to strip away my name and legacy. But now, the world wanted my version of events. I agreed. The next week, Mark arrived at our office with a recorder, a notebook, and the hungry gleam of a man who knew he had stumbled upon a story that could define his career. The interview lasted 2 hours, but I poured into it everything I had carried for 19 years, and everything I had endured in those final, brutal months. I told him about the empty promises of promotion that never came, about the Parker pen Alexander had theatrically snapped in 2 after stealing my campaign, and about the email that coldly severed my nearly 2-decade career while I was mid-flight on a billion-dollar deal. I spoke about betrayal, yes, but I also spoke about resilience, about the team that refused to abandon me, about the clients who chose integrity over branding, about the courage it takes to start over from zero when the world expects you to vanish. Mark barely interrupted, except to nod or scribble notes furiously. I could see it in his eyes. This was bigger than just another corporate scandal. This was a story about human will, about the courage to rise after being broken. When the article finally hit newsstands a month later, I stood outside a corner store in Oakland staring at the cover. There I was, not in a power suit before a glass skyscraper, but in front of our modest office, arms crossed, chin lifted, eyes steady. The headline was bold, defiant, impossible to ignore. The strategist they tried to erase, and the clients who followed her anyway. Inside, the feature pulled no punches. It detailed my years of loyalty to Innovate Dynamics, the ruthless purge orchestrated by Alexander Vance, and the collapse of trust that followed his decision. It exposed how the firm's arrogance had driven clients straight into my arms. It painted me not as a victim, but as a strategist who had turned betrayal into an empire's undoing. The impact was immediate. Emails flooded in, congratulations, partnership requests, even job applications from disillusioned Innovate Dynamics employees. Our little Oakland office buzzed louder than ever, and for the first time, I felt the momentum shift entirely in our favor. But the sweetest victory wasn't the new clients or the growing recognition. It was knowing that Alexander, who had once sneered at me across polished mahogany tables, was now forced to watch my face on newsstands, my name trending across platforms, my story celebrated as his downfall was dissected. The man who had tried to bury me had instead built me a stage, and now the spotlight was mine. The magazine article was more than just a story. It was a detonation. It sent shockwaves through the corporate world, a cold, hard exposé of a new CEO's brutal ambition and a seasoned veteran's strategic brilliance. The fallout at Innovate Dynamics was immediate and catastrophic. My former colleagues, the ones who had stayed, were leaving in droves, not just for my firm, but to escape the sinking ship. The clients who hadn't followed me were now scrambling, calling their contacts, demanding answers. The board, faced with plummeting stock prices and a public relations nightmare, was forced to act. One evening, my phone rang. It was Isabella, and her voice was a mix of shock and pure glee. "Evelyn, you're not going to believe this. They did it. They finally did it." "Did what?" I asked, a tight knot of anticipation in my stomach. "Alexander Vance is out. The board fired him, effective immediately. They announced they've appointed a new interim CEO. They said his vision was not in line with the company's core values." She laughed, a loud, triumphant sound. "His vision almost bankrupted the company, is what it did. They're running around like headless chickens over there. It's glorious." I hung up the phone, a quiet, satisfied smile spreading across my face. I didn't celebrate, not with a glass of champagne or a loud cheer. My revenge wasn't in the public spectacle. It was in the quiet, undeniable success of my own creation. Alexander Vance was gone, but the true victory was that I was still here, building something stronger and better. Later that evening, an email arrived in my inbox. My heart hammered as I saw the sender. Innovate Dynamics. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I sat back in my chair and looked around my office. It was small, a far cry from the opulent corner suite I'd once occupied, but it was filled with life. Mark was still at his desk, head bent over a complex line of code, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Anya and Isabella were huddled together, laughing over a new design mock-up for a client we had just signed. We were tired, but we were alive. We had built a team, a company, and a legacy from the ashes of betrayal. Finally, I opened the email. The subject line was a formal, strategic partnership discussion. I scanned the body of the message, It was a formal invitation to explore a strategic partnership with my firm. They acknowledged my success, my unparalleled expertise, and admitted that my absence had created a significant vacuum in their operations. They wanted to work with me. They wanted to share in my success. I felt a ghost of a smile on my lips. They had thrown me away like an old shoe, and now they wanted me back. Not as an employee, but as an equal. The irony was almost too sweet to bear. I leaned back in my chair, the words on the screen blurring as I thought of the long nights, the stolen campaign, and the broken pen that now sat on my desk. A polished, silent reminder of that first act of betrayal. The moment had arrived. They were offering me a chance to come back, to be the hero who saved the very company that had tried to destroy me. The old Evelyn, the one driven by loyalty and a hunger for a corner office, would have leaped at the chance. She would have seen it as the ultimate redemption, a validation of her worth. But I was no longer the old Evelyn. I was the new one, the one who had faced down a corporate monster and built her own empire. The one who knew that true power didn't come from a title or a corner office, but from self-respect and the freedom to create on my own terms. My worth wasn't something they could give back to me. It was something I had already reclaimed. I slowly moved my cursor over to the trash icon and clicked it. The email disappeared, just like they had tried to make me disappear. It was the most satisfying click of my career. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated peace. I had won the war, and now they were begging for a truce. My revenge was complete, but it was not about them. It was about me. I had built a legacy from the very ashes they thought they had buried me in, and it was all mine. I closed my laptop and walked over to my team. "Let's order some celebratory pizza," I said, a wide, genuine smile on my face. "We have a long night ahead of us." We were no longer fighting for recognition. We were building a future. The San Francisco skyline glittered across the bay, a vast expanse of steel and light, distant and untouchable. Once, it had been a symbol of ambition, a pinnacle to be reached, a summit to conquer. Each sparkling window had represented goals I chased tirelessly, sacrifices I had made in pursuit of recognition. But those days were gone. Now, the skyline was just a landscape, a stunning backdrop to the empire I had built from the ashes of betrayal. The city didn't intimidate me anymore. It simply witnessed my ascent. They had tried to define me by my downfall, to paint me as disposable, a footnote in their carefully curated history. But my ambition had never been my flaw. It had been my greatest asset. The very reason I had been noticed. The reason my former company faltered in my absence. The reason I had survived. The broken pen sat on my desk, angled slightly toward the edge, a silent relic of a pivotal day. I reached for it, fingers tracing the fractured metal. In the past, it had represented a promise unfulfilled, a betrayal that cut deeper than any verbal insult. Now, it symbolized the opposite. A turning point, the moment when one corporate legend was broken and reborn. Holding it, I felt the weight of history in my hand, but also the freedom to redefine it. I was no longer just a strategist, no longer merely a cog in a machine built by others. I was a founder, a leader, an architect of my own destiny. My story wasn't merely about revenge, it was about resilience, about proving that a woman who refused to be erased could rise stronger than ever. As I gazed at the city lights, I realized that the story wasn't over. It had only begun. Every flicker of light reflected possibilities. Every shadow hinted at challenges yet to be conquered. The pen, once broken, was now ready in my hand to write the next chapter, not of someone else's narrative, but of my own. I understood now what true power looked like. A company's greatest asset wasn't its logo or the empty vision of a CEO. It was its people, their loyalty, their expertise, their ability to think beyond protocol and hierarchy. Alexander Vance had been blind to this. In his short-sighted ambition, he had replaced experience and integrity with obedience and youth. He had seen me and my team as relics, dispensable figures from a bygone era. By stripping Innovate Dynamics of its true core, the people who had built its success, he had left nothing but a hollow shell. I hadn't destroyed it. I had only shown the world what remained when vision was replaced with ego. The phone rang sharply, breaking my reverie. It was Mark. His voice carried excitement, disbelief, and a hint of awe. "Evelyn, you're not going to believe this. A major magazine just called us. They want to do a follow-up story on how we're handling our new growth. They said the original article about you went viral. Everyone wants a piece of the story." A quiet smile spread across my face. "Tell them we'll be happy to talk," I said, my tone calm but firm. "But on our terms. We set the narrative now, not them." This was more than recognition. It was validation. My team wasn't just following a leader. They had found purpose. We had all been cast aside, labeled obsolete, dismissed as irrelevant. But together, we had forged something stronger than any corporate hierarchy. We were united not by title or paycheck, but by shared history, shared loyalty, and a common goal: to prove that talent and integrity couldn't be replaced by blind ambition. One evening, I stayed late in the office, staring out at the glittering lights of San Francisco. Memories of past victories and stolen accolades flickered in my mind. The awards I had won, the campaigns I had led, the moments I had been celebrated yet undermined. But now, the city wasn't a monument to personal glory. It was a canvas for creation. I wasn't merely climbing to the top of someone else's ladder. I was building my own world, a structure founded on vision, resilience, and loyalty. I was the master of my own fate, no longer at the mercy of tyrants who measured power in fear and intimidation. My success was no longer a trophy. It was a legacy, one that would endure. I reached for the broken pen and set it next to a new, sleek fountain pen. A gift from my team, a symbol of trust, respect, and shared victory. One pen represented the past, the struggle, the betrayal. The other represented the future, the promise, the unshakable power we had reclaimed. I had been tested, I had been broken, and yet I had refused to be erased. My story was no longer defined by what they had done to me, but by what I had created in response. The chapters ahead were mine to write, the narrative mine to control. And as I looked out at the endless city lights, I knew the final chapter wasn't coming. It was waiting, and I was ready. The story of Evelyn Reed isn't just about revenge. It's a powerful testament to resilience and the ability to reclaim your life. The most important takeaway is this: when you face betrayal and injustice, don't let the fire of anger consume you. Instead, use it as fuel to build something greater. Never lose faith in yourself or your talent, because those qualities are the most solid foundation you'll ever have. Remember, you can control your own narrative, and sometimes being pushed to the edge is the best opportunity to write a new, more glorious chapter. Thank you all for joining me on this powerful journey. The story of Evelyn Reed is a potent reminder that resilience and self-belief can help you overcome any challenge. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, leave a comment below to share your thoughts, and share this video with a friend. And most importantly, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter of my storytelling. See you in the next video.